this on? Good morning. Is my microphone on? Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing today? A wonderful day in Washington, D.C., and I want to welcome everyone here and thank you for coming out this morning. I'm Congresswoman Karen Bass, and we always look forward to the Africa Policy Breakfasts that we do every couple of months to have an opportunity where we can delve into issues that are going on in the continent in a way that sometimes it's difficult to do in our traditional hearings. I want to ask you to join me in welcoming my very, very good friend and colleague, David Cicilline, who is a representative from Rhode Island, former mayor of Providence. Our subject matter for today is South Sudan, and it was just a few years ago that so many of us celebrated the formation of the world's newest nation. And I'm sure that many of you who were very excited a few years ago have also, over the last couple of years, had our heart broken several times as we've watched difficulties develop in South Sudan. The nation that we hoped was going to be a bright light has certainly had a lot of difficulties over the last few years, and I know our panelists will address that. And we've seen many peace treaties happen, peace agreements happen, to only a few weeks or days later for those agreements to collapse. And the current agreement that is underway, we sit and we wait and see whether or not in the next few days Riek Machar will return to Juba. It is hoped that that will happen, and it is hoped that that return will be peaceful, but we will wait and see. Yesterday I had a wonderful opportunity with my colleague Mike Capuano, who is from Massachusetts, and Mike, who will be joining us at some point this morning, is the co-chair of the Sudan Caucus. A number of members of Congress on both sides of the aisle who were very, very involved over many years about what was going on in Sudan, and were also very much involved in the U.S. support for the creation of South Sudan. We had an amazing opportunity yesterday to meet with who was formerly called the Lost Boys and Girls, who are grown men and women now, who have had amazing accomplishments. And I would just like to ask, from a show of hands, how many people were a part of that delegation that were former Lost Boys and Girls, now very accomplished men and women? Please raise your hands. Why don't you stand? Why don't you stand? We are very happy that you have joined us today, and we'll hear from you a little bit later on today. We're doing things just slightly different this time. In our previous Africa Policy Breakfasts, usually we just have one panel and open up for Q&A, but today we will have two panels and then open up for Q&A. I want to specifically acknowledge David Akut from my office, who has served as an intern with me for the last several months and have brought many of the issues that have been faced by the Lost Boys and Girls to my office that has led to legislation that we're looking at introducing, and he's responsible specifically for the outreach to the men and women who just stood, and also the panel. So we need to give David a round of applause for his. So please join me in welcoming our moderator, who is a former diplomat, Ms. Cynthia Boonton, who is the president of CRB LLC and the president of the board of directors at the International Student House, where she has attended, I believe, just about all of our Africa Policy Breakfasts, and she'll get this show on the road by introducing our first panel. And you know, for those of you that have attended these before, when we have members of Congress come, we will stop and have them share a few words, unless we would like to begin with our colleague here sharing a few words. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I just want to add my strong voice of admiration for my colleague, Congressman Bass, who, in convening these breakfasts, has allowed us, both as members and certainly as important members of the community, to really have deep discussions about some of the most vexing issues on the continent and some of the most exciting opportunities. And I appreciate always being invited and included, but I really want to acknowledge the extraordinary leadership of my classmate, the great Congresswoman from California, Karen Bass. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Representative Bass. Congressman Sistani. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very full morning with wonderful speakers, so I will begin. We have two speakers on our experts panel. The first is Ambassador Princeton Lyman, who is a senior advisor at the U.S. Institute of Peace and a legend in the Foreign Service and the diplomatic world. He has served as USAID Director in Ethiopia, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Ambassador to Nigeria, Director of Refugee Programs, Ambassador to South Africa, and Assistant Secretary of State for International Affairs. To my left is Dr. Agustino Ting Maya, who is the Director of Research of the Sud Institute in Juba, and an Associate Professor at the University of Juba. He is a lost boy who resettled in Salt Lake City, Utah in 2001, and he is leading one of the premier South Sudanese think tanks, which he co-founded in 2012. He has done a number of research projects. He is engaged in a number of research projects, and both Princeton and Agustino are going to give us our views on the situation on the ground. Before Ambassador Lyman or Princeton speaks, I will give you the ground rules for the Q&A session that will follow the speakers. Comments and questions are welcome. We ask that you limit them to 2 minutes. We ask that you state your name and affiliation, and that you pose a question and not a speech. And I will repeat the ground rules right before the Q&A starts. So, having done all that, I would like to turn the table over to Princeton.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. Thank you, Congressman, for being here and for hosting this very important discussion. I think almost everyone here knows the scope of the terrible situation occurring right now in South Sudan. There are over 2 million people displaced, tens of thousands have died. There's over 800,000 refugees in other countries, including, ironically, 200,000 South Sudanese having gone into Sudan. And there are estimates of as high as 6 million people who are going to be insecure in terms of food. Fighting still goes on. Aid workers were attacked just the other day. There have been 50 attacks on humanitarian aid workers trying to help the people in the country. It is a very fragile peace that we're dealing with at this moment. As Cynthia mentioned, we are hopeful that Riek Machar will arrive in Juba on Monday. His deputy is there. A fairly sizable security contingent is there. But there's a basic dilemma in this peace process, and that is the following. The people who put together this peace process wrote out a very comprehensive process, one that involves a great deal of reform of nearly every institution in South Sudan. It's the kind of comprehensive peace that you would want to sit down and design. But in the end, to stop the fighting, IGAD and the negotiators turned to the very people who started the fighting and who undermined all those institutions before. So the basic challenge in a peace process like this is, how do you get the people who ruined the peace to carry out a peace process so comprehensive that they may no longer be leaders when it's over? And that's the challenge, and it's going to be a very difficult one. Now, when and if Riek Machar comes Monday and the process gets underway in a more formal way, I think things in Juba will be very tense. You have two large contingents of military on each side. You have no intervening military force. That is, the UN mission is not equipped or even ready to intervene should fighting begin between those two forces. Excuse me. The African Union thought of but did not put its own force on the ground. So the situation in Juba, I think, is going to be very, very tense. Now, what is needed in this situation? I think, first and foremost, the African Union and the international community has to give enormous amounts of support to President Festus Mogae, the former president of Botswana, who is the chair of the Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Committee, that is, the international oversight of the peace process. Right now, to be honest, I don't think he gets the support he needs, because unless he can truly enforce the process on those two contending leaders, it will not work. And that means he has to be backed up by the African Union and by the UN Security Council, and particularly by the neighboring countries. The other thing that I feel is way overdue is an arms embargo. I do not understand the reluctance to put an arms embargo. I do not see any justification for the continued purchases of arms by both sides. But that takes, first and foremost, a decision by IGAD and the African Union, and a willingness to enforce it, because it's the neighbors that have to enforce it, and then backed up by the UN Security Council. Finally, looking ahead, and for all you here who have done so much and wanted so much to contribute even more to the peace process, I think that what we hope out of this peace process is enough space, enough political time that institutions can be rebuilt in South Sudan, in the parliament, in the ministries, in the judiciary, so that in a few years, as hopefully this generation of leaders is moved aside, that there are a readiness to take up all the tasks of an independent Sudan. If the peace process can allow for 3, 4, 5 years of that, then I think we have some real hope for the country. Let me stop there.
Thank you. Before you begin, Augustino, I'd like to recognize Representative Barbara Lee, who just came in. Thank you.
I also want to acknowledge the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, G.K. Butterfield.
Okay, Augustino, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning. It's a pleasure to present here at this setting as a South Sudanese coming from home, spending years there doing work, NGO work, analytical work, and teaching at the university, and to be able to share my thoughts with respect to the current affairs in my country and what could be done by the South Sudanese that are here as well as American friends. And so I was asked to speak on the work of the NGO industry in South Sudan, and so Ambassador Princeton sort of spoke to some of the humanitarian issues that the NGO communities deal with in the country. I'll speak somewhat on those issues, but not as much as I would do with respect to what the analytical community does in supporting development as well as humanitarian in South Sudan. So first of all, for those that are not familiar with the NGO work in South Sudan has over 380 NGO institutions covering both local and international. And the work is centered around two things. One is development, and the other one is humanitarian. And as you know, the current situation of the country, it's basically a reflection of animosities across the board, people fighting each other. The shift towards humanitarian effort has been greater in the last few years. And so there has been literal development in the country. And as Ambassador Princeton has spoken to some humanitarian situations affecting the country, such as displacement and need for food for over 5 million individuals, this, you can tell, has removed so many resources from what would be considered sustainable development. And so that is the current situation of South Sudan, that we have shifted away, given the war, from development and now doing more humanitarian work. But what exactly do we do as an analytical community? And that's the work of the Sirte Institute, the work of the university, as well as other centers like Ebony Center. For the last few years that we have existed, the Sirte Institute, and I should acknowledge this, came as part of the American people's effort in 2011 to support development in South Sudan, and that is to have an analytical institution that provides insights into policy issues in the country, and Ambassador Princeton actually spearheaded that, provided funds and oversaw some of the activities that we did. And so that's an acknowledgement that I would like to lay out for the American people in terms of supporting the work of NGOs, and especially the local institutions. The Sirte Institute does a number of things to support peace and development. First, it provides analytical insights into policy decisions that are made by the international institutions as well as local institutions. Second work is that it provides platforms for discussions on peace and development issues. And that has been our activity for the last 2 years, given the fact that the country is in crisis. And so what exactly does this mean in terms of this setting? Well, a number of things you can draw from this. One is that the relationship between American people and the South Sudanese people is critically important in terms of turning things around in South Sudan. And that is to say, there is need for sustained support, not just for humanitarian activities in the country, but also for analytical institutions, in development institutions, to be able to speak to the issues of peace, be able to speak to the issues of security, to be able to speak to issues of governance that are critically informed. Because much of the discussion in South Sudan is not only centered around returning peace, it's also centered around sustaining it when it returns. And you cannot sustain it without having this support in place. And so this gathering here, I think, is an opportunity to lay out some of the things that we can do at the youth that are future leaders to support the country. And being there to do this work as an individual and as a group to support development and peace will be critically important. And the support of the American people will also be desired. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn over to the second panel. We have three distinguished former Lost Boys and Girls. I will start at my near left is Ms. Nyamal Beale, who is the founding director of the Naya Eden Foundation. She's been a leader for advocacy and change in the South Sudanese community, where she's done various jobs, including led rallies, served as an interpreter, and worked with various youth and women's groups. She is the founder and director of the Naya Eden Foundation and has previously worked with the Ponca tribe of Nebraska as a project venture coordinator, researching and reteaching youth about their Native American culture. To her left is Mr. David Achua, who currently serves as the Legislative Fellow in the Office of Representative Karen Bass. In this capacity, he provides strategic guidance to the member on foreign policy, particularly the Sub-Saharan African countries, and undertakes efforts to enhance U.S.-Africa relations. And to David's left is Mr. Julius Wani, who is an independent policy consultant. He's a lost boy who currently serves as the policy consultant. He's been contracted by UNICEF, Transition International, SSI Analytics, and Spatial Networks. In 2010, he was contracted by the International Organization for Migration to co-head the South Sudan out-of-country voting exercise at the Referendum Center in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm going to ask all three of our speakers to provide remarks, and I think I would like to ask them to talk about what they see as the major challenges facing South Sudan and some of the key positive developments, because I think with all of these talented young people, there must have been some key positive developments. So, may I begin with David?
Thank you, Cynthia, for that wonderful introduction. My name is David Akuta, as you heard. I would first like to thank Representative Karen Bass for not only putting this event together, but for having other very important members of Congress, her colleague, join us today. So thank you for joining us. I also want to acknowledge Team Bass in the room. In everything Representative Bass do, there's a team called Team Bass, so you should know that. My story is the same as many of the lost boys you might have met. It began a few years ago when we left our villages due to a war between Sudan. It's at the time when Sudan went to war by itself, the autonomous region of Southern Sudan. I ended up in a camp called Panyado in 1989 at age 4. And what I found was a bunch of young men and women that were around the same age. So we were grouped together, and they call us at the time unaccompanied minors. So we lived together. In one house you have 5 boys, or in another house you have 20 boys, and we became a family. We developed a bond from there. In 1990-91, Ethiopia had an internal war, so they kicked us out of Ethiopia. So we went back to Sudan. Immediately as we arrived into the Sudanese land in a place called Pachala, the Sudanese government responded with bombing our locations because our presence in Ethiopia was publicized, so they knew exactly, and their thought at the time was these would be reused as reinforcement to the SPLM army, so we better take them out now. So the decision was made by the UN and the Sudanese and the South Sudanese people to send us to another camp, and that was in Kakuma camp in northern Kenya. One of the most hot conditions I have ever been in my life. So with my colleague here, we went to Kenya and we lived in Kenya for about 10 years. In 1999, an opportunity came, and that opportunity came out from the United States. The people of the United States, the faith-based community, the advocate community came together and told the U.S. Congress that these boys have suffered so much. So in order to help them, we need to provide them with the opportunity to bring them to the United States, and maybe they make a good use of their life. So I got the opportunity to come to the U.S. as part of the Lost Boys program that many of you might have heard of. So when I came to the U.S., I landed in Michigan. I went to high school and went to college and got my master's degree in Minnesota. And I came to Washington, D.C., now working for Representative Karen Bass. So if you look at my life story, which is similar to many of the faces you will see in this room, sometimes I cringe when I walk alongside of Representative Bass in the hall of this House of Representatives. Because how do you go from that life, Kakuma, Panyadu, to United States House of Representatives? It is, sometimes I don't believe myself when I look at these halls, So I'm here to share that story with you today, and also to highlight that South Sudan has a future in me and my colleague and other young men and women who are scattered across the world. We have a large population in the diaspora, and the idea that South Sudan would get an independent that has taken the life of my father and many other people, family, relative, but then the country was pushed back into one of the most horrible conditions that we have seen. To me, it's sad because this conflict that is going on now has touched me personally, and some of you might know this already. My own mother lost her life on December 27 in 2013 with the current conflict. When the night the war happened in Cuba, I was with Agostino Ting. He's a close friend of mine. We were playing chess, and I got a phone call, and my brother said that there is a shooting. And that day I asked him, I said, what is going on? And we couldn't really comprehend what was going on. So we just everybody just kept calling. And Agostino and I stay up until 4 a.m. in the morning, and I was on the phone with my mother. She was in the next city called Boertown. And the following day, it was the same thing. We would talk to her. People have run, but she could not run because she had arthritis on her knee. So she was stranded. So Agostino and I try to get some of our colleagues that we know, see if somebody can actually provide a transportation. We even spoke with somebody in the government, said we will pay you money, but they were unable to go because the road was cut off. And on day 4, communication with my mom was cut. So after I learned that her life has been taken, I made a decision that I will not use her life to divide the South Sudanese people, to say that I want to rebel. But instead is to say that for me to come to the United States, and when I walk out of the plane, there was a stranger at the airport with my name on it. And they gave me everything they gave me. And I went to college. From the day one, people have been helping me. The best I could do for South Sudan is take what has been given to me and give to those who need help in South Sudan. So I just wanted to start by sharing my life story so that, and this is similar to many of the Lost Boys, because sometimes when you see a movie about the Lost Boy, you might miss the details, or sometimes it's very hard to put the face together with the story. So that's what I just wanted to highlight, and thank you very much.
Ms. Beal?
Good morning, everybody. As you have heard, my name is Nimal Beal, and I'm fashionably late. That was all planned. It is crazy driving out here. I mean, I'm coming from Nebraska, so we have cornfields and not a lot of traffic. So I got to experience that this morning as part of my American experience. Like our brother David said here earlier, our story is very similar, but it's different for females. As he was saying, Lost Boys, I keep telling him under my breath, and girls. And girls, so let's keep that in mind. So I came here fairly young and was relocated in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's where my American journey started, in a very small town community where the darkest skin complexion person they ever seen was me. So that was an interesting journey in itself to be able to now in America identify myself racially. So that was an interesting journey as to now am I an African or an African American, and going through all of those feelings. Currently, I am a founding director of the Nya Eden Foundation, which is an organization where we, as young South Sudanese women, are going back to South Sudan to help our own women and sisters over there, because we feel that that is only what we could do as young women, and the opportunities we've gotten here to also go back and give back like the gentlemen have been doing. Being here in America has definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things, and having the opportunity to get education as a woman that is by far one of the greatest opportunities that I could ever have. I went through the school system here. I graduated with an undergrad in human relations, so hopefully I'm relating with all of you well this morning. At Doane College in Nebraska, and this fall I will be going to Arcadia University for a master's in international peace and conflict resolution, because I feel very strongly that South Sudan needs to have young women on the decision-making table, and especially in peace building. That is something I see is not happening in the country, although they say that constitutionally there is a 25% spot that's held for women. That's just on paper. It's not realistic. And that is what a lot of us young South Sudanese women are working in different fields. You know, there's a young lady back there. She's a journalist. She's making her mark in our community by telling the truth and so forth. So I'm just really glad to be here this morning and to also represent my gender, because we hear a lot about the Lost Boys, but not so much about the girls. Okay, so we're in the diaspora. We may not be girls anymore. We're young women now and mothers, but we're still here and need to be also known and also seen. And our story hasn't been told as much as the boys that are now grown men. I make fun of the guys. I'm like, you guys are lost men now. Like, you're not lost boys anymore. Come on. So we're here, and we're also contributing to the building, the nation building in South Sudan in our own aspect. It's just that it's not highlighted by the media. But we are keeping it together, you know. In any society, it's the women that keep it's in South Sudan, it has been the women that kept the country together, the families together. So let's not diminish their roles. Just because you see the guys fighting with their egos doesn't mean we're not fighting with our kitchen tools. So that is my journey, and I will add to it more later with questions.
Thank you very much. Before I turn the floor over to Julius, I would like to acknowledge Representative Stacy Plaskett, who has just arrived. Please. All right, the floor is turned over to you, Julius.
Is it on?
Yes.
All right, sure. Thank you, Karen Bass, Representative Karen Bass. And I would also want to extend my gratitude to the American government as well as the American people, because had they not opened the doors and allowed the lost boys and the lost girls to come to the United States, we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be sharing these stories. And perhaps the relationship between South Sudan, the now South Sudan, and the United States could have been different. But since the lost boys and lost girls arrived to the United States, the narrative shifted and gained momentum, and a lot of things happened, leading to the signing of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. I just want to shift the conversation on the lost boys and lost girls from the narrative of what they went through to what they have achieved so far and the prospect of what they could do in the future. And by that, I would like to start with the resilience and the determination that the lost boys and the lost girls, as well as other members of the diaspora, of South Sudan diaspora, have achieved, given the opportunity that they landed in the diaspora wise, not only in the United States. Talking about the resilience and the determination, at times I just plug myself out and consider that I'm not part of the Lost Boys and see how much they went through and how much they've achieved, because I went through a lot. Agostino is my witness. We've been in rough situation, and so that's why I'm very hesitant sometimes to talk about the narrative. I want to focus about what we have done and what we could do. That we have gone through a lot, but still we managed to achieve. And so I wouldn't speak about myself. I want to talk as a group, the Lost Boys and the Lost Girls, that when we came to the United States, the first thing we did, although we arrived at different interval, I came here in 2006. I had to wait for flight, just the flight. I did everything. I had to wait for 6 good years, tracking every Wednesday of every week of every year, of every month of every year, tracking every Wednesday to go and check my name on the board, working on food, and for 6 years. And even right now, I've been miscategorized as a member of the Morocco rebel group, and so I've been misplaced as a terrorist, technically. So my case has not even come through. I don't know how long I will have to wait, but still I'll put my smile on my face and move on and keep my head up. But these are some of the things, this is the resilience that I'm talking about. You cannot just look back about the dark that you went through, you have to look and focus in the future. So the first thing we did here was to recognize that this society is culturally diverse and we are not that unique. We should accept and become part of this culture. So we accept the cultural diversity in this country and manage to integrate. That was the first achievement that I congratulate ourselves for doing. The second achievement. Yeah. Sure. I'll go in. Right. So, and that is the first achievement that, we feel good about, accepting the cultural diversity and be able to integrate that. I have a lot of friends in DC who are non-South Sudanese. They're all from every corner of the world. And the second achievement is going to school, is our thirst and quest for knowledge. For some weird reason, we don't see it as a group and discuss this, but we individually feel the conviction that for one to become a better member of a society and for a society to become a better society, one has to be one has to have the skill, one has to have the knowledge, one should be able to relate with others. And so we accept that and we went to school regardless of our difficulties. Some have to work 3 jobs and go to school. I remember in New York, I was interning, I was working 2 jobs, and I was taking summer classes. At times, I was driving and I fall asleep. Nothing happened, thank goodness. So these are some of the things that we strive to do. So our thirst and quest for knowledge has drive us to the point that we have a PhD holder in name of Agostino. You guys heard from him. And just 2 days early this week, we have a colleague, Benjamin Machar, just got his PhD from Howard University. And these are some of the achievements that we should be proud of. And not only that, we also participate in sport and even going as far as becoming members of the Army and Air Force. We have a member of the Air Force in the room, is the tall guy at the back, right there. I can get his name. Moses. And just last night, we have a lost girl being drafted into the Women National Basketball Association, Abulga. So these are some of the achievements that we don't look back into our difficulties, but we look forward and want to become members of the international community, that we can, given the potential. The third element of our achievement is humanitarian and voluntarism. As soon as we get into this community, we do not forget about our past. We do not forget about our relatives. Most of us engage in humanitarian forming organization that help people back. And a good example that I can give you is the John Duff Foundation, which has built clinic in the Duke, and is helping a lot of people. Another example is the Valentina Achak Foundation that has built education. Another example is the Gabriel Hope for Our Young that has built education. So this is another achievement, right? All right. So I will have to wind up, but I'll keep a lot of things for the questioning. I have a lot of points to share, but I just want to celebrate that this moment is about celebrating the achievement of the Lost Boys, not so much about their narratives. Thank you.
Thank you, Julius. Before I open it up for questions and comments, I'd also like to acknowledge Representative John Conyers, who has just entered the room. Sir. Let me thank all of the speakers, our expert witnesses, our lost boys and girls, and let me personally say that I find your stories incredibly inspiring. And the fact that you have gone through what you have gone through and used it for positive change is incredibly admirable, and I thank you for sharing your stories. All right, I'm opening up the floor for questions and comments. I will reiterate the ground rules. 1, please introduce yourself and where you are from, your affiliation. The limit is 1 question per person, and please, a question, not a speech. And any comments you care to make, please limit them to 2 minutes. There is a microphone in the center of the room, and there is also one to my right behind Representative Bass and Representative Conyers.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Congresswoman Karen Bass, our hope. Congresswoman Congress Conyers, ladies and gentlemen, the lost boys of Sudan, you are not lost boys, you are boys of hope, because the hope you brought to Sudan is so great. My name is Rosemary Segero. I focus on conflicts and violence resolution. I'm from Kenya, but I'm based here. I spoke in last July at the Voice of America on young people of South Sudan and for Burundi on conflicts. So what I want to say is the leaders of South Sudan, the leaders of Africa, needs to give young people a table, to be on the table, civil society, because they don't listen to us. If we were all sitting on the table, as the young lady said, all these conflicts, violence, day-to-day problems would not be there, because they are leaders for tomorrow, and we, civil society, the government doesn't like us because we know what they are doing, and they don't want us to talk about what they are doing. So how do we sit, collaborate, and work together? Thank you so much, and thank you, the Voice of Hope. We are no longer the lost boys of Sudan.
Sir? Excuse me, I'm going to take a couple of questions at a time. Sir?
Thank you. I am John Thorn Majuk, and one of the lost boys. I'm with the Woodrow Wilson Center. I rise to make comments, and it's going to be very brief. And in support of the initiative that Congress is currently considering, and I would like to thank Congresswoman Bass for the initiative and other members of Congress. The question is here, building on the narrative and the achievement that this group has done, I want to speak briefly to the American people that your taxpayer dollars has an impact. And the impact is in the lives of these young men and women. They have not lived in despair. They are a resilient group that look for the positive things and to pay back to the country. So when an initiative like this is being considered, our key question for ourselves is how do we translate or transfer these skills back to the country to help build the institution so that a progress that has been made can be sustained. And nobody wants to drag down the progress. We want to sustain the progress. And this is the impact of your money, the American people. Sustain the progress that the U.S. government has made in the lives of these, in the person of these young women and girls. And that is an impact that you can be proud of if you can help transfer these skills back to the country to help build the country so that you don't always contribute humanitarian dollars, development dollars. These people can be the dollars. Thank you.
I'll take one more. And could you please also, if you're asking a question, let us know if you're addressing it to the expert panel or to the lost men and women. Barbara?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you to my Congresswoman, who I am so proud to be representing this morning from her district office, district area. My name is Barbara Perkins. I'm the president of the International Black Women's Public Policy Institute. We're 8 years old. We're based here in Washington, D.C. It's a board of 17 women who volunteer our services to help women in particular. And I was thrilled, happy that you made it this morning, thrilled to hear your comments about the work that you're doing for the women of Sudan. So my question to you is, one, how large is the population? I heard in the U.S., and I heard you say that you are going back to help. If you can give me some specific ideas about how that help is translated and how we too cannot be involved with toxic charity, but that the charity and the work that we want to offer is sustainable. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll wait for your answer.
One more?
One more.
Ma'am?
Okay. My name is Elizabeth Gooch. I'm one of the lost girls, the lost name or the silent name these days. As I stand here, I just want to make a comment. Nyamal, thank you so much for the great work that you have put through. I'm always proud of you. I would like to say also to David Achwet, thank you so much for this initiative as well. Your hard work is really showing, and we hope that it will actually produce and be fruitful as we go. Thank you to Julius and for the rest of the panels. What I would like to say has a lost girls who came to this country in 2000 and who have lived as a teenager and through now as a mother. Few challenges that we had as women who came to this country is we have jokes with two different cultures. Being a mother right now is one of the greatest challenge we have as lost girls, and also at the same time how to be able to contribute in a larger society that we are in and also back home. I would like to say to all of the congresswomen who are in here, I'm not trying to discriminate congressmen, but women, we came to this country has 89 girls. And that's why our story is not really being told that much. We are proud of the Lost Boys and we're always in support of it. However, we need the foundation as Lost Girls.